Hello to myself and everybody else. So far today, we're going to look at one of the last comic books that I have, and this is Comickers Art 3. So far with this issue of the magazine, it basically goes into writing a story and making characters. So far with this, if we look at the contents, you can see that there is a decent amount of stuff. Technically, this is shorter than the other Comickers book because the other ones usually had 4 sections. This one only has 3. But so far with this one though, if we look at what's actually in the book, it basically talks about artists and the world according to them. And then it goes into topics such as creating a story, setting up and creating your own manga world, how to present your manga world. Then it goes into the featured artist, in which with that it basically goes into interviews for some of them, and also some things like showing their workflow when making a sketch or finishing an image. Then after that it goes into gallery, hot new talent. Then it goes into story manga, which contains 3 stories for this magazine, and that's basically it. After that, just the index. The first part of the magazine talks about creating a story, in which off the bat it shows some topics such as what makes a good story, and then talks about a good story remains in the hearts of the reader, and then also about the importance of basic story patterns and monitoring the logical development of the story. Then after that it goes into multiple different points based on things such as character creation and the most important factors of building a story. It gives you different kind of tips and advice on that, such as close relationship between the story and the characters, thinking about the character's personality, and then also gives you a chart so you can kind of see like how the flow of that would be, giving you examples of what would it be like to create a character and the important things you need to keep note and track of when making them. With point number 2, it talks about skills for explaining a story briefly, and it goes into the importance of explaining the story, stories that reflect changes in the character's psychological behavior, summarizing the story in a short sentence, what is a plot, and an outline and a synopsis. It also shows you a table with different types of summaries, basically showing again what a plot and outline is, and what a synopsis and a story hook is, which again, both of these are pretty important too for like just summarizing, or if you're telling the story to somebody else so they can basically understand what you're talking about and you possibly sell them the story. So far, point 3 talks about incorporating opposing structures. Basically what that means is they're talking about like conflict such as good and evil, justice and evil, things like that. And basically again, it just goes like into pretty different like descriptions of various different topics such as having more than one story structure, story development using multiple choices, and grasping the story structure and eliminating contradictions. Even has some charts again showing examples of oppositions and conflict, and understanding the story structure using an opposition and conflict chart. So it really does try to like back up what it's telling you, not just trying to be vague about it, just telling you some examples of stuff and then just letting you go, okay, what could work for your story, if you'll use it or not. Just a lot of different like charts and examples for you to like reference. And so far the final point that they talk about is creating the story flow, which goes into thinking about the story, dividing the story, introduction, development, turn, and conclusion, as well as beginning, climax, and end, the midpoint. And it also talks about incorporating underplots after grasping the entire story and the final stages. So far, these 4 parts, basically just to summarize them, is basically helping somebody come up with the flow for making a story. So developing a character, explaining the story briefly, then adding conflict or opposing structure in it, and then finally like creating the story flow. So it just goes in those briefly, and then after that it moves into setting up and creating your own manga world. And it basically goes into, or basically explains that the manga world requires a defined structure. There are 2 factors to consider in this process: the illustration and the story. And then you can see the different topics it goes into, such as what is a manga world, what type of work expresses a manga world, representational design. And then on the other page, it basically talks about character design and how you can basically use objects to represent like their fashion or design. The next page basically goes into the background design and talking about designs of small objects and lifestyle, and Manga World expressed in a story, basically saying when you're drawing the world, don't be afraid to like add in smaller objects as well when you're like planning things out, because that can kind of give it more depth, showing the day to day of various characters and kind of fill in blank space so it doesn't feel like vague or like something's missing. Again, a lot of stuff you can take with a grain of salt, but again, does have a lot of like advice and suggestions in this for if you are interested in creating your own world, story, and characters. So a lot of this is actually pretty interesting to read. And so far, finally, for the first part, it basically talks about how to present your manga world. And basically, it just talks about like expressing your originality, have a wide range of ideas. And basically, just saying like when you're making your story or you're trying to draw it out, don't be afraid to just use different kind of styles, different looks and colors, because the different things you use can like help set the tone or the style or the feel of your story and world. So it's just saying nothing's wrong with just like trying a variety of stuff and just seeing what you can come up with. So far, when we get to the featured artist on the next page, it basically starts off with an interview with Okama and basically talks about one of the things they're working on called Cloth Road. And basically, again, just an interview, asks them a variety of questions. Hopefully, I'm like zooming in so you can just kind of like see the variety of questions they ask and everything and stuff too on this page. And basically, it continues and stuff as well on the other page as well too. Just asking things like what inspired their like designs for the characters, what did they normally like think about when they're drawing the scenes and things like that. And it shows like a lot of sketches of characters from what they're currently working on as well. So again, that's like the whole thing with the interview and everything here as well. Just more sketches and showing a lot of rough drafts with what they're currently working with. A lot of rough drafts, again, just showing like a lot of their different work, what do they think about it. And again, I think it's like other works they've been working on as well too. So just again, talking about them and their design and stuff as well. So again, pretty interesting interview, a lot of questions, a lot of stuff. You definitely can get something from this on the mindset of the person who like made these characters or was working on it. So again, just if you're interested in the interviews or just again, like basically just poking around somebody's brain, again, it is very interesting to look at. A lot of designs and a lot of like concept art from Okama. Basically, when we get to the next part, it is an interview with Hiroshi Kaeda. And so far, again, same thing. Basically goes into just an interview with them, talking about drawing materials and techniques, asking them what kind of like drawing materials do they use, what's their workflow like, and just other things like, is there any factor that has influenced your creative work or hobby? Just again, more interview questions as well, so you can just get to learn about the person and their workflow as well. And with this interview, it also goes into drawing, like basically shows their rough sketches and their workflow from when they're drawing or finishing a sketch. So with this, you can just kind of see that they break it down into steps as well, just showing like how they start with a rough draft, into them dividing the image into parts for coloring, then them going into tinting, and then finishing the process. It also continues with showing other rough drawings of them doing rough drawings to drawing with ink, to them coloring in backgrounds and humans. Again, just shows a lot of like rough sketches and their workflow and process. So this is something that is very interesting to see. And again, just seeing somebody else's workflow could also help you a lot with just like getting information and helping your own work process and workflow as well. So again, a very interesting part of this magazine as well. The next part is basically showing another rough draft sketch to finished product. And this time it's with the featured artist Hoden. And with this, it basically again goes into a rough drawing to basically them scanning and working with the computer to them coloring it in. It does show a lot of like their process and steps as well. There's no interview with this part, just them working on the rough sketch to finishing it. So again, something that can be useful if you need to see somebody else's workflow from back in the day. So that is very useful to see. The next part goes into an interview with Shigeki, and basically it's talking about something they're working on called Faint Sigh of the Enchanted Princess. Again, it's a pretty short interview, just asking them questions about like what is the story about, what made you write this story, things like that. Again, pretty short interview, basically just advertising the thing they're working on. And it even has a few, again, like just some concept art on the next page. So again, just something to like look at and everything real quick. The other feature artist is Takia, and basically it's just showing some of their artwork in the beginning. And so far, this person is also the one who put one of the comics in each one of the Comickers magazines. So basically just letting you know like who this person is, some of their work. And if we keep looking, it basically just goes into another like rough sketch to finished product. So with this, again, just showing like their work, what they do for like a rough draft to inking to going to the computer, just showing a lot of rough sketches as well. Because they're like full pages that just straight up show like the rough drawing, the graphic storyboard, the sketch, the ink drawing, just showing all of that, just how much work it takes to really draw this stuff and get it done. And then also shows like the preparation they go to get their stuff ready, what they do for the coloring, just a lot of their work, just showing it off so you kind of just see the entire workflow with it. Again, it does definitely take a lot to like do this stuff, so it is very impressive to see all of it done. Then after this, we hit the second part, which is gallery, hot new talent. And with this, again, it's same thing like in the other Comickers books where it's basically just a bunch of, I'm assuming, up and coming artists. And again, it's a lot of really good pictures in this as well. I don't want to stay on it too long because I don't want to have to like show every single one and like, do the reference to every single one and stuff like that too. But again, there is a lot, and they are very impressive in this book. Really nice to look at as well. And then finally, the third part is the story manga, which again basically contains 3 stories in this that were made specifically for the magazine. Each one of these, it's kind of a thing where it's a shame that this is the English version of the book, but each one of these are in Japanese, so I can't really read them or comment too much. But at least with this one, they do kind of have a summary page of what's going on in each one of them. I'll just go ahead and put a picture of that up. Hopefully it's good quality to be able to see. But yeah, basically just shows like the first one is Faint Sigh and the Enchanted Princess. The other one is Cogito Ergo Sum. And the last one is Nopera Bo. I guess I'm saying it right. Faceless Ghost. So yeah, basically just giving like a quick summary of what these 3 are about, in which the other ones, they kind of gave a brief summary in some of them, but with this, I think it goes a bit more into detail. So again, that's a pretty nice thing they did with this one. As far as I know, this was the last Comickers book in English. I think there is one more, but it's like a coloring book and not a book on coloring, but I think a literal coloring book. So again, that one I'm not going to get. So yeah, just if anybody has information on that, again, be great to just, if someone put information on that in the comments. But basically, that's really it for this book. That was the whole thing covered. So far, my entire thoughts on Comickers 3 is that, again, this is a pretty interesting book, especially if you are very interested in writing your own story or developing your own character. And again, this is a book I probably will reference when I'm starting to like make my own stories and characters once I'm like good at drawing. The main thing I've had to say is that, again, a lot of this stuff, it does give like little quick suggestions, or they just kind of briefly go into the topic or subject of it. So far, again, it is something good to refer back to, and I probably will in the future. But it is definitely a thing where if you need more explanation or detail on designing or writing a story or character, like if you can't get your hands on this book or you need more information for it, then I would probably recommend getting these other 2 books I'm going to throw on the screen right now. Basically, How to Write for Animation. Basically, this is a whole book that goes into writing a script, having an idea and like, completely thinking it through, how to pitch your idea, how to write dialogue, a ton of stuff like that. And this other book, Manga and Anime Digital Illustration Guide. Basically, this one goes into what you should think about when designing a character, and goes into stuff on how to design a character for different mediums or media as well, for like mobile games or posters, magazines, various stuff like that. Again, just two things I just want to throw out there if you can't get your hands on this like iteration of Comickers 3. But yeah, so far again, just for the first part of the book alone, I would probably recommend getting this book just for like good information. But again, it is a thing where this book might be kind of hard to get because thrift books, as far as I know of, I don't know if they have any more copies of it. So you might have to find a copy of this on eBay or something. But the other parts of the book as well, such as the interviews and seeing how a lot of people go from rough sketch to finished product, that's also a pretty good reason as well to like check out this magazine and stuff too. Just to see the workflow and to see how other people get their work and job and stuff like that done, as well as to, just basically poke people's brains to see like what they thought about the stuff they were working on and their work process and flow. And even for that too, just to check out like the art gallery and stuff as well. Again, all this I would recommend, but specifically for the beginning part of it is a pretty good reason to get this book, because Comickers 1, pretty interesting for like learning how to work with different materials and water. But if you're not working with water, I wouldn't recommend the first Comickers book. The second one, that one's pretty good for like generalized advice for if you're starting off with sketching, but it really wouldn't teach you how to sketch too much. It just kind of taught you to lighten up, and now it really was it. But this one, again, gives a lot of good information for, again, getting started with writing, making characters, and a lot of things people really should know if you want to get into just learning how to make books and stories and all that. So definitely a thing I would recommend trying to find if you can. But again, if you can't, then I just put these other two books back up on the screen. Look for like these two books as well. Can give you more information on that and stuff. So just something I'll probably recommend and stuff like that too. But overall, Comickers 3, pretty good book. I got it from Thrift Books. Don't know how many copies there are left or if there is any left. But again, you might can find one on eBay or something. Who knows? Or you might can find an archived PDF. But I don't know if it will be in English or not. So just one of those things I have to look for and see. But yeah, overall, again, Comickers 3 I would recommend getting, and it was a pretty decently good read. So that's really it. So to myself and everybody else, see you in the next one.